All right, welcome to part 3 of the turn-based tutorial. So let's just continue right where we left off here. So we want to fix this mouse issue first of all. So let's go to our player controller, and if you search for mouse, so there's an option here. We want to show the mouse cursor. So now if we run this and we click, you can see our mouse doesn't disappear, which is really nice. But the way I have this set up in my project at least is that in order to be able to move the camera around, you hold down right click and then you can fly around and the mouse will disappear. And let me just show you real quick. Because this is how we're going to be setting it up because I think it works pretty well. So you can see the mouse moves around freely. And if you hold down right click, you can fly around and the mouse disappears. And then if you let go right click, the mouse shows up and you can click people and move them. And so we're going to be setting up that sort of functionality. So yeah, make sure show mouse cursor is set. And then the rest of the code we're going to be writing inside of our pawn, which is the actual thing we're possessing. So inside of core, let's open up this turn-based pawn. And inside of here, we're going to write the movement code. So, yes. So for this, let's go to the project settings because we want to make some bindings actually. So edit, project settings, and then go to input on the left. And we want to add some action mappings. So action mappings, hit a plus button and then hit this little drop down. So, sorry, let me open up on my other so I don't mess this up because sometimes I get confused when I do this. Okay, so we want to add, if you already have mappings here, feel free to use these, but just so you can follow along with the tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly what I did. So I have move X, which is moving on the X axis, and then we want to set that to W, and then we also want to add another one and set it to S, and give it a, wait, why is there no scale? Oh, sorry, not action mappings. Delete this. Axis mappings is what we want to use. So axis mappings, and then we're going to call this move X, and then we want to select W. We want to add another one for S, except for S, we're going to scale it by -1, so it's backwards. And then we want to move Y, and we're going to set it to D and A. And for A, we're going to set it to -1. And then we want one more for move Z, which is up and down. And we're going to set up to E because that's what Unreal uses to go up. And then we're also going to use Q to go down. So we're going to make this Q negative. Okay, so now we have all these guys. We can just close this. And then we can just delete these for right now. And so what we want to do is we want to add our own custom movement code. So right click and search for that input access move X. Make sure we do this one right here. And so all we want to do is say add movement input. And then we need to give it a world direction and a scale value. So the world direction, since this is X, is going to be our forward vector. So we'll say get actor forward vector. And then for the scale, we can just pass in this if we want to, but if we want to be able to control the speed at which the camera moves, we want to take this and we want to multiply it by some value. So we can actually make this a variable, so it's configurable really easily. We can right click, promote this to a variable, and we will just call this the camera speed, and we can make it private. And if we compile it, we can set the default value. So you can set it to something like, actually I want to set it to something pretty high because we're going to be multiplying it here by the axis value, which is going to be pretty small, or as well as just going to be 1 really. And so yeah, so this will, if we're moving forward, it's going to be 1 times 1,000, so it's going to move it at a speed of 1,000. And then you can make this faster or slower depending on what you want. And then we want to do the same thing for the Y and Z. So input, access, move, Y. And I'm just going to copy the majority of this, or I guess all of this, except for Y is left and right, so we want to use the actor's right vector. So let's delete this and say get actor right vector, and make sure you hook up this node as well to the axis value again. And then again, we will just copy, paste this, and then we want input axis Z, and hook this up, and this up, and then, oh my gosh. And then for this one, we actually want, I mean, you can do whatever you want, obviously, but I think it makes more sense if you just do the world up vector. So that way, if you're tilted down and you go up, you go straight up and not up relative to your character, because I think that's a little bit confusing, and that's the way Unreal does it. So we'll just say vector up here. All right, so let's just give this a try real quick and make sure we didn't mess anything up. So, oh, that's not, oh, I know why. Because we need to add, so by default, this is just a pawn. You can see the class is pawn, and it doesn't know how to move. So you need to actually add the loading pawn movement to it, and this will actually allow it to process these movement events. So now you can see if we press W, A, D, Q, or E, they all do what we expect. And so now we just need to be able to sort of look around with the mouse. So to handle that, like I said, we're going to be using the, what are we going to be doing? Oh yeah, we're going to be using the right mouse button. So down here, we can right click, say right mouse button. And for the right mouse button, when we click it, we want to hide the cursor, right? Because we only want the cursor to show when you're not flying around. So to do that, we can get the player controller. So we can right click, get player controller. No, not that one. We want, actually, you know what? Let's just do this in the begin play, and then we'll save it into a variable so we don't have to do this every time. So we'll say event begin play. And we want to get controller, I think. Yes, get controller. So that's going to get our controller. And we can cast this to our turn-based controller. Or actually, we can just cast, well, you can either cast it to a turn-based controller, or we really only need a player controller, but we'll just say cast to turn-based player controller since that's what we're using. And hook that up, and then we're going to take this guy and promote it to a variable. And we will call this our player controller. And we will make it private. I'll save. Okay, so now back down here, what we want to do is we want to drag in our player controller and hide the cursor. So we'll say show mouse cursor and set it to false. And then after that, we want to set a boolean for whether or not the right mouse button is down, because when this is down, we want to do some different behavior inside of our tick. So we're just gonna make a variable and call it right mouse button down question mark, and we'll make it private. And so we're going to set this to true. And actually, I just remembered, yeah, so we want to have a delay here of 0 seconds. So if you hold down D and you left click, you'll get a delay node. You can also just search for it. And we want to hook this up between these two, and we want to set it to 0. And the reason we're doing this is because when we, maybe I can explain this better later, but when we hide the mouse cursor, we're also going to keep it in the middle of the screen. And so if you were to not hide it, it would look like this when you're moving the mouse around, because it's continuously being put back to the middle of the screen, so you don't go too far left or too far right. And this delay makes it so that when it's transitioning between hidden and not hidden, you don't see any weird issues. Maybe we can take this out and I'll show you what it does, but for now, just add this here so I don't forget. And then from here, we want to save the location of the mouse, because like the way this works is like, if you pay attention here. So if my mouse is up here and I right click, what's actually happening behind the scenes, so I'm holding down right click right now, my mouse is actually right in the middle of the screen on the left. And then when I move it, it's staying in the middle. And then when I let go, you can see it's actually back up here at the top where I had originally right clicked. But maybe I can show you this on my other project real quick, because then you'll see what I'm talking about. Like if we don't, I'm just going to take out this hide here. So if we don't hide the mouse cursor, you'll see exactly what's going on. So I right click, and then it moves to the center. So I'm holding down right click, and then as I move it, you can see it's staying in the middle of the screen. And we're going to do that in the tick, and then I right click, it restores its location to where we had originally right clicked from, and that just makes it a little bit easier for the player to, like, you know, it's better that way, so the mouse doesn't always go to the middle every time you click. So that's basically what's happening sort of behind the scenes. So set it to true, and then we want to save that location so we can revert back to it when we let go of the click. So to do that, we can say get player controller, and we want to get the mouse position, and then we want to save this into a variable. So I'm going to make a int point variable over here. So make a variable, and we're going to call it the mouse saved position, and we want to change the type of it to be int point, which is basically an x and a y value as integers, and we'll set it here. Oh, and we can make this private as well. So we'll set it, and we can split this value so we get the x and the y separate, and we'll just drag this here, and it's going to do a truncate. That's fine. It's just getting rid of the extra decimal values, which don't matter. And there we go. And then when we release it, we want to set right mouse button down back to false. I'm just going to copy paste this, set it to false. And then we want to set the mouse position, like we want to restore the mouse position back to this saved value. So again, we'll say get player controller, except this time we'll say set mouse position. And of course, the position we want to set it to is going to be our saved location. So we'll drag this in and say get, and then we are going to split this and hook the X into the X and the Y into the Y. And then again, we're going to do a delay just so we don't get any weird. If you don't do this, you'll sometimes see the cursor being transitioned from the clicked location to the center, or from the center location to the click location. And then finally, we will show the mouse cursor again. So I'm just going to copy these two values, paste, and set it to true. Okay, so now if we run this, you should see when we right click, the cursor goes away, and we can move the mouse around as much as we want. And then when we let go, the cursor comes back to exactly where we had clicked it at. All right, so if you don't do this, we don't do the show here, you can see what's happening. So we right click, and then I can move it, and then as soon as I let go, it pops back out to where it was, right? So now what we want to do is while the right mouse button is down, we want to use the mouse movement to actually rotate the camera. So to do that, we can add two events here. So we'll say add, or actually I think these already exist. So it's just mouse X. So this gets called, well, okay, so let's click it. So this gets called every time the mouse moves, or I think it gets called every frame technically, even if the mouse doesn't move. And so if the mouse moves like, I think X is left and right. So if the mouse moves right, then the axis value is like a positive number. And if it moves left, then it's a negative number. And so what we want to do is we want to check if the right mouse button is down, because otherwise we don't care, right? If the right mouse button is down, we want to use this value to rotate the camera. So we'll do a branch. So if the right mouse button is down, then we want to use add controller yaw input, right? Because we want to yaw left and right for X. And the axis value is just this. And we want to do the same thing for the Y. So mouse Y. Ooh, not that one. Get mouse Y. No. What am I doing? Mouse Y. Where is it? This one? Okay, there we go. This one. And then we want to do the same thing basically, except instead of yaw, we want to do add pitch. So add controller pitch. Hook this up. Hook this up. All right. Oh wait, but for this one we want to multiply by -1 because, well, I guess it depends on if you play games inverted or not. But for me, like when I move the mouse up, I want it to do a certain thing, but other people like it to do the opposite thing. So I'm going to multiply this by -1. If it feels backwards for you, then just don't do this. But I think most people play this way. Okay, so let's give this a try real quick. So we play. And if I right click and I move the mouse, I can move around. But you'll probably notice something right now. If you keep going left, you'll eventually hit an edge where you can't go left any further. And that's because, well, if we don't hide the mouse here, you'll see exactly why. So I right click and I start moving left. You see the mouse hits the left side of the screen and I can't move left anywhere. But obviously you don't want this, right? You just want to be able to infinitely turn around. So to do that, we need to keep the mouse in the center of the screen. So that's going to happen inside of our tick. So we'll say event tick. And then again, we only want this tick to actually do anything if the right mouse button is down. So normally it's not going to do anything, but if the right mouse button is down, we can drag this in. We can do a branch. We want to force the cursor to be in the middle of the screen. So to do that, we need to get the viewport size and divide it in two so we can get the center of the viewport. And then we need to set the mouse's position to that. So right click and say get viewport size. And then we can split this guy so it gives us the X and the Y. And then we want to say divide and divide. And of course we want to divide by 2, 2. And then this is going to be the new mouse location. So we can say player controller, get set mouse position. And the X is going to go into the X. And again, it's going to truncate, which is fine. And truncate. And there we go. So now if we run this, and let me just unhook this again so you can see what's going on. So if we play this, you can see by default, we can move around the mouse just fine, no problems. But when we hold down the right mouse button, it puts it in the center of the screen. And even if we move it to the left or the right or up or down, it's just constantly getting put back to the center of the screen. And then when we let go, it goes back to where we had originally clicked from, right? So that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes. And of course, we just hide it with this node right here. So once we have this hooked back up, we run it, it should look nice and smooth, and you don't even know all the crazy stuff that's happening behind the scenes. Oh, you know what? What did I do wrong here? Something is messed up with my, oh, I know why. We need to change this guy. I don't remember which checkbox this is. Let me look for a second on my other computer. Yeah, so we need to set use control rotation, because what's happening right now is, I don't know if you noticed this, maybe you noticed this before I did, but if we like look to the right and then we hold down D, I would expect to go right and not backwards. But the reason that's happening is because we are using our control rotation here. So the forward vector is the forward vector of our actor, which isn't actually rotating when we rotate, unless we come over here and we say use control pitch and use control rotation yaw. So this is under the class defaults. So now if we have these checked and we rotate to the left and then we hold down D, it will actually move us relative to our character, which makes a whole lot more sense. And then you can also make it so that you can also do the same thing. Like if you don't want to be able to, because right now you can move, which is maybe a little bit weird, even if you're not right clicking. You could add, if you want to, you could add a check here for if the right mouse button is down, then do this and this and this if you want. I'm just going to leave it as is for right now because I don't really care. I think it's fine. Yes. Okay. So now we have our pawns set up and it should work on both sides just fine. That one works. This one works. Okay, so now the next step is to actually get our whatchamacallem, our heroes or whatever in the game, so we can actually click on them. So the heroes are going to work very similarly to how the player starts worked, where we're going to give them a number, like player index, and so that way when you're playing the game and you try to click on a hero, the server is going to know, or you're going to know whether or not that server actually belongs to you and whether or not you can actually move that character. So let's go back to our content folder and let's go inside of the gameplay folder that we created. And inside of here, let's right click, make a new blueprint class, and the parent is going to be a character. And we'll call this our BP underscore hero. So this is sort of like the base class for all of our heroes. And then we can open this up, and obviously you can use the mannequin here. You can use whatever you want. I'm debating if I should use the mannequin or the actual characters. I guess I should probably use the characters because I told you I would at the beginning. They're just kind of annoying to use, in my opinion, because they are terrible, but we will use them anyways, at least one of them. So the skeletal mesh, Let's search for Yin here. I don't know which one's which. Any of them will do. Okay, this one is fine. You can select whatever you want. And we want to take her and put her down here towards the bottom and rotate so she's facing forward, like so. And then she has her own animation blueprint that comes with this. So I believe it's this anim BP yin. Maybe not. Yin anim blueprint. There we go. So this is her animation blueprint. File and save it. But the reason I said they're terrible is because their animation blueprints, at least in Unreal Engine 5, don't actually work all that well without making modifications. But I'll show you what to do if you are curious, just to make it so they can actually walk, because it's not too bad, I guess. But the main thing we want to do here in our base class is actually, yeah, this is our base class. So we don't really need to set the skeleton here or the character mesh here, because we're actually, what we're going to do is take this guy and create a child blueprint, and we'll call this one BP Hero Yin. And then inside of here is where you really want to set her up to do like Yin specific things, right? Because this one's just more of a base class. And so, like, for example, we could have another base class. So if we take this hero, right click, create child blueprint, we could make a totally different hero, like BP Hero. I have no idea what this other guy's called. Let's call it Hero blah. Hero blah. And we can set this guy to a different mesh, right? So we can come over here to his mesh, and we could select, you know, this snake killer or whatever this is. And then we can select his animation blueprint, which I have no idea what this is going to be called. Probably like that weird, yes, KAM whatever, anim blueprint. And there we go. Now he's doing his thing. And the idea is that we want to just drag these in the world wherever you want them to spawn. So maybe you want to start with her over here. Maybe there's a couple of her that you get to play as. And then there's a couple of her on this side, which obviously need to face a different way, like so. And then maybe they each have one of these guys. And yes, okay, so amazing setup here. But the important part is we want to be able to click on one of these guys and say, this hero belongs to player 1, or this hero belongs to player 0. So to do that, let's open up BP Hero again, and let's add a variable called player index, and we will set it to an integer. And just like we did for the player starts, we want to select the exact same checkboxes for the exact same reasons. And then we can now come back here, compile this. We can now come back to our viewport, and let's see. So this player start is set to player index 0. So we're going to set these guys to 0, which they should be by default. Yep. And so this left side here, since this one is set to 1, we want to set these guys to 1 as well. So I'm going to control select all these guys. So we can do that once. And we will change the player index to 1. File, save all. Okay. And then now back in our hero, our base class, we want to make, because we made this thing private, so we're going to need a function here in a second at least to get the player index. So we're just going to really quickly make a helper function here called get player index, and it is going to return the player index just like so, and it's also going to be pure and const, just like we did inside of the spawn points. Okay, so this is really all we need to do here inside of our base class. And so the next thing we need to do is add the logic for tracing, doing a line trace when you click and figuring out which character you're actually selecting. So if we go back to our player controller, I think that's where I did this. Let me just double check. Yeah, where is our handle left mouse button? Yes, this is the one we want. Okay, so inside of here, we want to write some logic, right? Because if we just left click in the middle of nowhere, we don't want to end the player's turn because they really didn't do anything. We only want to end their turn if they actually clicked on a character and then they selected where they want them to move to. So let's go ahead and start fleshing out this function. We're just going to put this up here for right now. So we're going to actually start with a sequence node, because we're going to be doing two things. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the hit result under the mouse cursor, and that's going to tell us who we actually clicked. So we'll say get hit result under cursor by channel, and the channel we want is the camera, and you can trace complex or not depending on what you want. Trace complex basically uses complex collision when it traces, which means it traces per triangle as opposed to using like the bounding box or something. I think it's kind of overkill, so I'm not going to click it. And then we want to do a branch to check whether or not we actually clicked on something. If we did not click on anything, we just want to return, right? Because there's really nothing we want to do. We don't want to penalize the player for like misclicking or something. But if they did hit something, we can take this struct and we can break it. And we want to save a couple of these values. So we want to save the location that they clicked, which is going to be, I think you can use location or impact point. I think they're the same in this case, but I'm going to use impact point, and then we will promote this to a variable, and we will call this the newly selected location. Actually, scratch that. We want to make this a local variable. So delete this variable because this variable only needs to exist inside this function. So we're going to make it local. So right click, promote to local variable, and then we'll call this newly selected location. Hook this guy up to true. And then the other one we want to save is the actor that we hit. So right click on this, promote to local variable, call it newly selected actor. Actually, you know what? Let's take this guy because we want this to be a hero because we really only care about heroes. If we select a bush or a tree, like we don't care. So we want to take this guy. We actually want to change this to a BP hero base object reference. And it's going to yell at us because we can't do this anymore. So let's just refresh this node. And then what we can do is we can take the hit actor and we can cast to BP underscore hero. And if it succeeds, then we will set this guy like so. So hopefully that makes sense. And then once this done, so this line trace, it's either going to return if it doesn't hit anything. Like if you just click at the sky, it's just going to return. And if you return, this sequence isn't even going to run. But let's say we select the train. So if we select the train or the ground, then this branch is going to be successful, and then we're going to get here and we're going to set the selected location. But this is going to fail because the train is obviously not a hero. But if we do select a hero, then both of these will be set. So a lot of things could happen depending on what we select. But as long as we select something, we're going to get into this then to statement. So we want to kind of figure out what happened. So the first thing I want to check is whether or not the hero we selected is the one we currently have selected. Because if we select a character to control and then we select that same character again, we don't want anything to happen. So we need to have a variable over here, and this needs to be a global variable. And we want to call it our selected hero. And again, make sure it is of type BP hero. We can make it private. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to check if the selected hero does not equal the newly selected hero, which is the one we just clicked. And so we'll do a branch. So if they're not equal, that's great, and we want to do things. If they are equal, which means this is going to be false, then we can just leave this empty because we don't want to do anything, right? So the next thing I want to check, assuming that they are different, we want to drag in our newly selected character, and we want to check if the newly selected actor is valid, because again, we could have selected a tree or a bush or the ground or something that isn't our hero. So if it is not valid, let's just handle that case first because it's a little bit easier. If it's not valid, we want to take our selected hero and we want to check if he is valid. So we'll say it's valid. Actually, we can just do right click and convert to validated get. So if our selected hero is valid, then we want to move, because basically what's happened is that we've selected something that isn't a hero, but we already had a hero selected. So that means we selected a hero and then we selected something else. So in that case, we want to use our move action. So we're going to say, I think we have it up here. Yes, we're going to take this guy cut, bring him down here, and we're going to say server action move hero. But now we can actually pass in values to this because we're actually writing this code. So we want this function to take in the server that we, or sorry, the hero that we want to move and the location that we want him to move to. So let's double click on this guy and just edit it real quick. So we're going to add an input pin for the BP underscore hero. And we will call this the hero. And then we're also going to add one for the, or sorry, a vector for the location that we want him to move to. And we'll come back and we'll write this code here in a second. But for now, let's just compile and go back to where we were. So inside of here, we want to pass in our hero, and we want to pass in our local variable for the newly selected location. And then finally, we want to set our selected hero back to null. So to do that, we can just very simply drag in our selected hero and say set, and then just not pass anything here. Because if we don't pass anything here, it's basically just setting it to null, which is perfect. Okay, so that's the is not valid case. But if the newly selected actor is valid, then we want to do one of two things. We either want to set our selected hero to that hero, meaning, you know, we've selected a hero for the first time, so now we want to say we've now selected this hero. Or if the selected hero that we attacked is not on our team, or like doesn't belong to us, then we want to attack that hero. So let's start out by getting the player index of this hero. So we'll say get player index. And we want to know whether or not his player index matches our player index. So I guess we haven't added the player index yet. So we need to do that real quick. Because right now we're inside the player controller. And we need to be able to know if the heroes in the world that we are selecting belong to us or not, right? So let's really quickly take a detour, and we want to go to the event graph here. And what we want to do is we want to make a little function. I'm going to do this up here at the top because this actually is going to happen like right away, and you'll see why in a second. So we're going to add a custom event here called set player index. And this is going to take in a player index. So we'll say input and integer and player index. And then we want to just take this guy, right click, promote it to a variable. And for this one, we want to set it to private. And more importantly, we want to set it to replicated. So the reason we're doing this is because in the game mode, we're going to call set player index on the server. And we're going to tell the player, hey, you're player 1, or hey, you're player 2, or whatever. And we want that value to get replicated to the client so that when the client's doing the clicking logic, he can figure out whether or not the players that he's selecting belong to him or not. So we just want to call this function from the game mode. So if we go back to our game mode and we go to our event graph, so up here in our post login, before we do this code, let's actually move this over to the right a little bit and unhook it. The first thing we want to do before we even do that is we want to call this set player index function. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy this guy again, and we want to get this newly connected player and tell him which index he is. So we're going to cast to turn-based player controller, like so. I'm just going to add some little reroute nodes here so it's not going through stuff, and drag off this guy and say set player index. Let me just move this over a little bit more. And there we go. So the player index is going to be this value minus 1, right? Because when somebody first connects, let's say the very first player connects to the game, get number of players is going to return 1 because there's one player connected. But we want to assign his index to player 0. So for that reason, we're going to take this and we're going to subtract 1 and hook that up. So now, whenever a player connects on the server, we immediately tell that player which player index he is so that he's aware, so that when he's doing the line traces to figure out who he can click on, he'll know which players belong to him, right? because of this. Okay, so now back in our handle left mouse button function, we can make use of this variable. So if the newly selected actor, we want to check if his player index equals our player index, like so. And if it does, so we'll do a branch here to figure out whether or not it does. So if it equals our player index, that means we just want to select this character, right? So we can say selected hero, set, and we want to set it to the get newly selected actor. And if it doesn't, then we want to attack him, right? And we already know that he's not on our team because we can say player index equals player index. So if that's false, we know he's not on our team. So what we can say is we can drag in our selected hero. We can check if he's currently valid, right? Because if our selected hero is not currently valid, then really all we've done is just selected an enemy hero, but we hadn't first selected a friendly hero, so there's really nothing we want to do in that case. So only if we have a friendly hero selected and then we select an enemy hero do we want to try to attack him. So that's where we can call our server action. So server action attack hero. And then for this one, we need to add some input parameters as well. And hopefully you guys can see kind of the flow here. Like these server actions are things that the client does that perform an action, and then they can take in their own unique parameters depending on what that action is. So for this one, we want to take in who's being attacked and who's doing the attacking. So let's just double click on this real quick and add those parameters. So we'll add an input parameter, BP underscore hero. And this will be the attacking hero. And then we'll add another BP hero. And this will be the attacked, or like the victim. So the attacked hero, like so. And so now back over here, the attacking hero is our selected hero, and the attacked hero is our local variable, newly selected actor. And then finally, just like we did before, we want to set our selected hero to null, since we're no longer going to be using him because he did his thing already. And there we go. Okay, so now it's just a matter of writing these functions. So let's go to the move one and do that one. So in this tutorial, I'm not actually going to be writing the attack one. We're just going to be printing out information. I just wanted to give you guys another example of how you do it, but we will go ahead and write this move one because it's pretty straightforward. So let's take all this stuff and move it to the right because this is the last thing we want to do where we kind of end his turn. But first, we want to call move to location. Or wait a minute. We want to say hero get AI controller. That's what we want to do. Get AI controller, move to location. And then the destination is obviously the location that was provided to us. We want to make sure use pathfinding is selected. And then we can finally hook this guy up like so. So in order for this to work, we need to actually add a nav mesh. So let's go ahead and do that real quick because otherwise they won't be able to find their way. So to add a nav mesh, really simply just search for navigation over here on the left. And it's called, let's see, nav mesh bounds volume, I believe is the one we want. So if you drag this in, by default it's just a box. And you kind of want to put it so, why can I not control anything? All right, sorry about that. I had to restart Unreal because it was just decided to stop working. But okay, so now we're back. So we have this Pathfinder here, or this nav, whatever it's called here. You want to drag it so it's like halfway in the ground, and you actually go show up here, and you can show navigation, and it will show this green little patch of whatever, and that basically shows you where there is a nav mesh. So characters can only walk where there is a nav mesh. So you want to scale this up to cover the entire terrain. And if your terrain has elevation to it, you need to make sure you scale it vertically as well. But you basically just want to be able to see green wherever you want them to walk. So, and you can see it's pretty cool because if you take this cube and kind of move it to the middle, you can see it recalculates it so that they know to walk around the cube. So that's basically what that's doing. And it won't work if you don't have this because AI don't know how to move if they don't have a nav mesh. So I think that's pretty much it for that. So we have our move to location. and we can give this a try. So let's just go ahead and run this here. Oh yeah, and they have these ridiculous like startup animations that they do. I can show you how to remove those if you want. But yes, so let's see. So it's my turn on the right. So I should be able to click freely. So I'm just left clicking, and you can see it's not any my turn anymore because I'm not actually doing an action that we have selected. I'm not actually moving a character. But if I select one of my characters here, so I select this guy, now he's selected kind of behind the scenes. It's kind of hard to tell right now. But if I tell him to move, so I'm going to click right here now, you can see he kind of skateboards over there. That's what I was saying about the animation graphs. They're kind of like broken. I can show you how to fix this though if you're curious. But yes, and then it says waiting. So now it's no longer my turn. So now on this side, we can do the same thing. Take this guy and move him or her. And now she moves there. And you'll notice now it's my turn on the right. So if I try to click this guy and then I click one of my own characters, you can see nothing happens. It's really now I have her selected. But if I select on her and then I select an enemy character, you can see my turn ends because behind the scene it's really doing an attack. It's just kind of hard to tell because we don't have a lot of UI stuff going on. But behind the scenes it's all working and it's allowing us to do movements and attacks. So just to kind of show you guys how to fix the animation issues if you're curious. I don't know why they're like this. Like it's probably just part of the whole make Unreal Engine 5 terrible thing. But let's go to our Yin character and open up the blueprint editor. So just in case you guys are curious, we can go inside of our animation blueprint here with that little magnifying glass, open this up, just dock this up at the top. So if you want to get rid of that crazy flip she does at the beginning, you can just delete this begin play. And this is the same for the other character as well. So I'm only going to do this for one. You can delete the begin play and she won't do that crazy nonsense flip at the beginning. And then if you want to fix the issue of her not actually walking, you can come in here to the animation graph, go inside, I forget what this is now. I think it's ground locomotion. Yes. So, all right, so we want to change this one right here. So when you go from run to jog stop, if you go into this transition node here, for some reason, I don't know why they did this or how this ever worked, but they are checking if we're no longer accelerating, which doesn't make sense because if you're running at a constant speed, like if you're just jogging at a constant speed, you're not actually accelerating. But they say, well, if you stop accelerating, then stop playing the run animation, which doesn't make sense. So we want to get rid of this, and instead we want to check the speed. So we can drag in the speed variable, and we can say float greater than, or what is this? Greater than 0. So if your speed is greater than 0, well, we want to say not Boolean. So if your speed is not greater than 0, which means it's 0 or less, then we want to return here, which will make him stop jogging. And I think we also, let me check my other project because I changed one other thing, but I don't remember what it was. Oh yeah, it's this one. So the one that goes from jog stop to jog start. You also want to take this one because this one also doesn't make sense to be accelerating. You also want to change this one to be speed greater than 0. So we'll say speed greater than 0. And I think that's all you need to do to get her to actually run correctly. So now if we play this, you can see they don't do their crazy flips anymore, or at least she doesn't. And then if we click her and we tell her to move here, you can see now she runs and she stops and all that good stuff. So I think at this point in the tutorial, I'm probably going to stop because I don't want to just go down this rabbit hole of very specific things that probably most people don't care about. But just so you know, like the whole attack thing, like you have all the information you need here to do the attack. So if you look at your player controller base, like this is running on the server. So when the server gets this, you know who is doing the attacking and who they are attacking. So, you know, you can add any type of logic here that you want to do any type of attack that you want. And you can add as many different type of server actions as you want and just continue to follow this pattern using these server actions. And, you know, you can basically change this system to work however your game needs to work. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and a like and subscribe to the channel. I also have a Discord channel. It's in the description of this video if you guys want to join me there. There's a bunch of people that do like game dev stuff and you can ask questions. It's a pretty good community. And I also have a Patreon. If you guys want to support me there, that's always greatly appreciated. But yeah, otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.